Okay, morning everyone. I hope you can hear me. uh, okay, so uh, okay, so just setting something here. Yeah, so I hope you can hear me. If not, please let me know so that I can check if there is any problem. Otherwise, I'm going to start a new topic today, which is actuarial valuation. So remember, we have already covered a number of topics which are related to this one here. So if you remember, we generally, we covered funding. So we saw, a number of funding approaches which can be used in pension fund. So we saw terminal funding, regular contributions and stuff like that. And then we covered the investments and stuff like that, right? And along the way, we were actually talking a lot about ensuring that, let's say, your assets matches the liabilities. And remember, in this case here, the liability, we are referring to the benefit which you have to pay, because remember, you have promised members that they will receive, let's say, benefit when they retire, or maybe when they become sick and stuff like that, right? So today we are going to see how we can value these liabilities and stuff like that. So we have some models, of course, not a very complex model, but will give us an idea about how these things work. So I'm going to start with just a quick introduction, because I'm going to talk about a bit about models. So it's all about discussion. So it's not like I'm presenting like all pension fund models and stuff like that. It's all about description, trying to understand how these things work, right? And of course, if you understand this, I hope, because you can simply, align, if you go, let's say, to pension fund, because what we are covering here is just, the base, right? So of course, if you go there, we'll have to learn more about how can you apply these models, right? So the focus will be more about how can we use models to solve problems in pension funds. And again, what is the requirement of a good model, right? Because you have to pay attention to a number of features of a model, like maybe parsimonious model, complex model. So which one should you use, for instance? And also, we have two types of models which we are going to discuss here. We have deterministic models, and also we have stochastic models. And also, of course, we shall talk a bit about the rule of sensitivity testing, right? And stuff like that. So when it comes, to projection of benefits, generally, we are referring to, so not only benefit, by the way, so there can be a contribution. So in general, when we talk about projection, we are referring to two main things here. So we are referring to the projection of the level and also the incidence, right? Because we have to make sure that we can project the amount, but also not only the amount, also the timing matter, right? At what point will you start, let's say, to pay certain type of benefit, right? So can we project that? So the focus will be more on not only the amount, but also the incidence, or we can say the timing of the contributions themselves. So we have some examples here at what scenario maybe you might need this projection models. So of course, I hope you can take a look on this one here further. But generally, you might need this problem to solve a number of problems. For instance, let's say you're trying to set contribution. So if you're trying to set contribution, you will, let's say, be interested in matching what you have. So the asset maybe and the liability. So what are you trying to pay at the end of the day, right? So can you match this? But because you are doing the matching today, right? Then what you'll have to do is that you'll have to project what you'll have to pay, let's say, in the future. And then, of course, maybe you'll have to find the present value of those expected benefits, right? Because we have to make decision today, right? So we use models to project, the future benefits. And then can we express everything in today's values? Can we find the present values of this benefit so that we can make a decision today, right? So not only in setting contribution, but also you can maybe try to do some projection simply because you want to find a good mix of asset which you need. Because remember, you have to invest today. So if I'm investing today, I have to be sure, not only, of course, not sure, at least I need to have an idea about the amount which I have to pay. And also I need to have an idea about the timing, right? So remember I said in the previous lectures that, of course, we have to make sure that we match not only the timing and also the amount, right? So I'll have to do projection of the expected amount which will be paid and also the timing as well, right? And then maybe try to find a good mix of assets which will be able to match this liability at the end of the day, right? So this is a few examples of how these models can be used when it comes to projection. And yeah, so I think this is the same thing which I've already covered before, right? I mean, you are trying to set contributions, so you need to do projections about the liabilities or what you're expecting to pay when benefits are due, right? And also the timing as well, right? So that is why you might be interested in, these projection models, right? But I mean, remember in this case, you'll be doing, this is simply, an empirical analysis, right? I mean, there is nothing strange here because if you're doing an empirical analysis, of course, you need inputs. And a good example of inputs which you can have here is actually the method itself, because you need the model. You need the model to be able to do some projections. Also, you need to set assumptions. Remember, when it comes to doing projections in pension funds, you need assumptions about economic variables, you need assumptions about demographic variables and stuff like that. So you need to set assumptions, because remember, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that at the time, let's say, when you are doing valuation, you have to check if, let's say, the actual fund matches, maybe the benefit which is expected to be paid, right? So it's very important that you set, robust assumptions, right? Because if you set, assumptions which are not robust, then of course you should expect, divergence between, let's say, the standard fund and the actual fund at the end of the day. I'm going to discuss about this one here at the end of the day, but assumption is one of the key input when it comes to doing projections. And also, of course, you have data, right? Because at the end of the day, we need data, right? So this is obvious, right? So generally, we use, the term here, MAD, so MOD. So MOD is just the short for model assumptions and data. This is actually what you need when it comes to projecting, can be liabilities, or maybe you want to project maybe a return on investment and stuff like that. So of course, this is just, some few examples of these assumptions, which you might, let's say, need when it comes to projections. So we have, let's say, age at which the benefit become payable, right? So you need age, you need, okay, so what is going to trigger, let's say, the payment of this benefit? Because remember, the payment of benefit can be triggered by retirement, or maybe can be because of death, or maybe because of illness and stuff like that. So can you project this thing, right? So we'll have to make assumptions about this. And then, of course, we have the rate at which benefits will increase. Remember, we said we have increase in pension, right? So we can have increase in pensions, which are already in payment, or we can have increase in pension, which are in deferment. Because sometimes the rule might say if someone, let's say, leave early from the pension plan, they will have to wait until the normal retirement for them to be able to receive the benefit. Right? So you have pension which are increasing, but are in deferment. So you have to make assumption about the growth rate of this benefit and stuff like that, right? And then, of course, you have to make assumptions about the level of, about the rate of investment growth and stuff like that, right? So generally, we have demographic assumptions, and also we have economic assumptions, which we need to actually make before we can do any kind of projections, right? So I will actually demonstrate some of how some of this actually work, right? So data, I don't think if I have to say much about this one here, but it's actually very, very important that you check the quality of the data, because this is actually the starting point of everything, right? So if, let's say, the data which you have of poor quality, then of course, it doesn't make any sense, right? So it doesn't matter how fancy the model you are using is, right? If the data are rubbish, of course, even the output will be rubbish at the end of the day, right? Yeah, so of course, you'll have to make decision about the choice of the model. So remember, we have a number of of models. So we are giving here like a very simple example. We are saying you can have models, right, which are, let's say, developed to do projections over a long period, right? Let's say you can have stochastic model which can give you a projection of a period of 30 years, right? So if, let's say, the objective is only to do projection for 5 years, then there is no any point for you to use this model, because this is a model which is designed to make projections over a long period, right? So why use that model, right? Because it does not mean that, I mean, because you have that complex model is going to give you accurate estimate over a short time horizon, right? I mean, that is designed for long term. So if you use that model, maybe it is not going to work well for you if you are objective with just, I mean, 5 years, right? So it's very important that you make robust choice about the model, right? And stuff like that, right? But not only that, because we can have stochastic models, we can have deterministic models. So you have to be happy with the assumptions underlying these type of models, right? But the other thing I think which we have to pay attention here is, I think we have already, yeah. So of course, even the parameters, you have to make sure that you check if the parameters make sense. Of course, overall, if the model makes sense itself in the real world, right? Because remember what we are trying to do here, that we are trying to understand the real world so that the model which you use actually makes sense in the real world. Are the parameters actually reasonable and stuff like that? So we are giving assumption here, for instance, about the parameter assumption. So we are saying, for instance, you should not use, let's say, let's say, discount rate based on the portfolio of equities if the assets are likely to be held on a deposit in a bank account, right? So why should you use a discount rate, let's say, based on the portfolio of equities while we expect our asset, let's say, to be deposited in a bank account, right? So we have to make sure that, I mean, the assumption which we are making in this case, I mean, robust, I mean, align with actually what we are doing in the real world and stuff like that, right? So I think, yeah, so you can read more about this one here. Yeah, so yeah, I think yeah, so I just have to comment about this one here as well. So we have what we call deterministic and stochastic models. So I hope you are familiar with this type of models. I don't think if there is anything which is strange here, because you have models which, let's say, has certain parameters. And in these parameters, we simply assume that, we assign fixed values to these parameters, right? So that is a deterministic models. I mean, you assign fixed values to the parameters. So that is a fixed model, but is that a good model? Is not a good model? Now it depends, right? But we are saying maybe a stochastic model is more realistic. Why? Because in a stochastic model, we assume that these parameters, let's say, they follow. I mean, let's say they follow a certain distribution. So if, let's say, the distribution which you have selected is actually a good distribution which can describe that, then of course maybe that is a good model, right? So we are saying, for instance, here, I think I have why? Because you can assume, let's say, a particular maybe parameter follows maybe a normal distribution or maybe a gamma distribution with this parameter and that parameter, right? And the good thing about that, you can say something about, let's say, the range of possible values and stuff like that, which is more robust than, let's say, just having point estimates and stuff like that. So I think I'm just giving here an example that the good thing about these stochastic models, I mean, you can employ them in such a way that you can make, let's say, assumption, like here we are saying inflation might be assumed to have a normal distribution with a mean of 3% per annum and standard deviation of 1% per annum, right? So, but of course, you'll have to check if that is a good model. You'll have to test, I mean, the goodness of it. And if maybe you have used a good model, of course, we expect even the result to be somehow robust, right? But also you can employ, I mean, stochastic models, let's say, to understand maybe like what we cover in hybrid pension fund. Because remember, we say in hybrid, what happens is that you can have, let's say, side by side. So you have, let's say, DC and then you have DB pension plan. So what happened in this case here, you can say, okay, let me try to understand at the end of the day which one is going to be applicable, let's say, when someone retires, so that you understand maybe the benefit, the expected benefit in general, right? Because you have different possibilities. It can either be, let's say, DC or DB, and you don't know that. So we are saying maybe if we use stochastic models, maybe you are likely to end with a more robust results compared to, let's say, assuming the parameters are fixed, because we expect, of course, parameters, to change, of course, over time. So maybe like if we try, I mean, different possibilities, maybe that is going to make more sense, right? So I think you can read more about this one here. Yeah, so again, you can make projections about return on invested asset, because remember we have to match two things, right? So we have asset, we have all the benefit we're expecting to pay. So can we do some projections about, let's say, the return of on invested assets and stuff like that, right? So I think nothing strange here. And then we have sensitivity. So this is simply, I mean, a very simple idea. So I hope you are familiar with this one here. So when using models, of course, you'll be able to, of course, you will have to prove to people that, I mean, my model is robust. And one way to prove that my model is robust is to run a sensitivity test. So sensitivity test is like you're assessing the model and the like you're assessing how sensitive the output is to changes in assumption. So you can say, okay, let me try to use assumption. Maybe let me try to assume, let's say, inflation rate is 4%. So it is going to be, let's say, the output. What if maybe we change maybe inflation by one decimal point? What is going to happen at the end of the day, right? So you can have, I mean, so you can run, I mean, all this sensitivity based on assumption, because remember you are setting these assumptions, right? So you'll have to prove to people that maybe, like even if, let's say, we change this parameter by this much, I mean, we don't expect much to happen at the end of the day and stuff like that, right? So you can have, I mean, sensitivity because of, yeah, I mean, it's so the objective, I mean, varies here because you can try to check maybe how sensitive the model is, or you can try maybe to check how sensitive the output is to changes in actual assumptions, right? So what I'm doing here more is about changes in assumptions. So if you change assumptions, I mean, how the output are going to actually going to change, right? Because sometimes you can change only by, let's say, one decimal point, and then you observe, let's say, dramatic change in the output, right? And you have to be very careful at that point, because what is triggering that change? I mean, is it maybe the model? Because you can have a problem with the model in such a way that only a small change maybe results into maybe huge change. So it's a good indication that you have to revise maybe your model and stuff like that. But sometimes it's simply, yeah, you have a robust model, and that is actually the change in output because of changing assumption by simply one decimal point, right? So it's actually telling you that maybe you have to be very careful with the decision which you are making. And that is why we are saying that having something in a range so that you get maybe a range of possible value, I think is more robust than simply using a single point, because decision made from a single point can sometimes not be robust, like getting a picture from, let's say, a wide range of possible values at the end of the day. So you'll see, I mean, in, yeah, I think I have some sample here, Actuarial report. You'll see that they have, I mean, to present this sensitivity, right? And stuff like that. So let's say we assumed inflation to be 4%, right? So what if, let's say, inflation turn out to be maybe 5%? What is going to happen? So it's like some kind of scenario analysis and stuff like that. But it's actually very, very important because it gives you an idea about how sensitive your results are. Yeah, so, and this can be done like in both, right? So it can be done in stochastic and also in deterministic models as well, right? Because in deterministic, we can say, okay, before we assumed the interest rate to be, let's say, 4%. So what happens if we change maybe the interest rate, or we assume this parameter to be, let's say, 3%, right? And in stochastic, we can do the same thing. Let's say before you assumed maybe inflation or maybe interest rate, let's say, follows a log normal distribution with these two parameters. But what if maybe we change the distribution because we found maybe a normal distribution and a gamma distribution, they actually maybe performed almost the same way. So what if we use one model over the other model? How sensitive the results is going to be, right? So this can be done actually in both deterministic and also stochastic models. So this is just, I mean, an example of what I've been talking about, that we might run our deterministic model using inflation assumption of 4%, then check the output, and then maybe for stochastic, you can change maybe the assumption of the probability distribution. So instead of assuming, let's say, we have this distribution with this parameter, we can change the parameters, or we can change the model, because it's all about sensitivity, right? So you can change the model, you can also change the parameters of that model, right? So it does not matter which one you're changing. It's still, I mean, sensitivity analysis. Yeah, so you can, okay, so this is just, I mean, like, again, what I'm covering here, I think is obvious to you because you have covered this in other courses like pension and stuff like that. So just, very simple stuff. So what do we have here that we are saying that when it comes to valuation of benefit, it depends on the objective at the end of the day and what you are trying to achieve and what maybe model you'll be using at the end of the day, because you can have, let's say, projection actually split into different different components depending on what you want to achieve at the end of the day. So you can have, let's say, benefit projected for each individual, right? So you have individual, let's say, in your so you have, each active members, and then you project, for each of these individual members, or you can try to project, the benefit, for each type, right? Because remember, we can have different types of benefit. We can have, let's say, ill health. We can have, let's say, benefit because of retirement at the normal retirement age, or because of early retirement, or because of death and stuff like that. So we can have, this benefit being splitted into these components, or we can have, for each year. So depending on what type of analysis do you want to do regarding these projections, right? So we can have this projection splitted accordingly. So this is the point actually what I covered before, that when it comes to projection, we are not only talking about projecting the amount, right? We are also talking about projecting the timing, or the incidence, right? So because, like I said, what is going to trigger the pension benefit, right? You don't know. That is the incidence. So we don't know what is going to trigger that, right? So it can be death, it can be ill health and stuff like that. So can we project that? Can we do projections about the incidence as well, not only focusing on the on the amount and stuff like that, right? Because we have different scenarios at which which can trigger pension benefit. So both the incidence and the level actually need to be projected. Yeah, so objective of the model, of course, this is you can read here more, but at the end of the day, you need to have objective. What am I trying to achieve? And the objective is the one which will actually guide you on maybe the choice of the model which you have to use, the assumptions which you have to make, and stuff like that. So how can we build a model? So we have to start from somewhere. Of course, nowadays we have all these softwares, we have all these languages, we have a number of packages which are already prepared for us. So we don't have to build a model from scratch at the end of the day, right? Maybe unless if you want to do some extension and stuff like that, right? But the starting point, depending on the objective, by the way, is like this one here. So you want to, so let's say you want to have the projected benefit outgo in future year T. So it's very simple. Just take, the benefit. So remember, I have the benefit for beneficiaries, and let's say for each year, right? So if I want to get, let's say, the total at the end of the day, I have to sum all the benefits for all beneficiaries. For each members who are receiving this benefit, and then of course, let's say for each year, if we can compute this, let's say per year. So we simply need to sum everything like that and get, let's say, the total benefit needed here. Right? But that is actually a very, very simple assumption here, because I've just, assumed, okay, we have the benefit, let's say, time T, and then we have for all member, right? For the beneficiaries, so the case beneficiaries, right? But that is a very simple thing, the starting point. I will have to adjust with the probability of someone who is current age X surviving to that age. So we are saying maybe we have to multiply that with the benefit, right? If we assume, let's say, we pay level benefit now, I just use B. And then multiply with the probability of survival. So now I get the expected benefit, right? I have the probability and then I have the benefit, right? But maybe that is not enough, because we are doing all this. We have to make decision today. We have to make comparison today. We have to say whether the pension fund is in good health or not. So we'll have maybe to discount everything to today's value. So I expect maybe to apply the discount factor and stuff like that. So I'm saying when it comes to building a model, you have to start from a particular point, right? So you start from the benefit, and then maybe, okay, we have to multiply with the survival probability, right, of these members up to that age, for instance. And then, of course, we can do further and further adjustments. So here we are giving an example that we can adjust, let's say, we can include, of course, individuals at other ages, individuals who are not yet eligible to receive pension, eligible other than through death, increase in pension. So you can start from the base, and then you can try to actually do some extensions depending on what you want to achieve and what you consider to be robust assumptions, right? Because remember here, I've not included pension increase. I've not considered that, okay, other members retire early, but then they will have to wait until retirement for them to get the pension and stuff like that, right? I've not adjusted for salary promotion growth and stuff like that. So very simple scenario, but you can extend this one here further depending on what you want to achieve. So we have, some basic features of the model here, but I think some of these are actually obvious. Yeah, so I think we have some type of models here. Not that hard, I think, because it's just a projection. Let's say you want to project cash flows, and this one here is very, very important, right? Because in this case here, I think what is going to be more interesting is the timing of these cash flows. Let's say like in pay as you go, right? Because in pay as you go, you don't have funding, right? You don't have pre-funding, right? You don't set fund aside, right? So it's very important that you project the timing. So at what point you are going to need, let's say, the amount of money which are needed to cover the benefit, right? So in this case here, we are saying that rather than estimating, let's say, the present values, we are concerned with the timing as well as the amount of the future outgoes, right? So I think like a good scenario is where you have pension fund which does not have a pre-funding, right? So what will be interesting not only about the amount which you have to pay, it's also about the timing, right, of the cash flows. Of course, you can have other method, let's say, which involve funding. So you have pre-funding, you set money aside. But in case if, let's say, you want to make decision based on comparison. So I'll say your objective is to compare, let's say, the contribution, the present value of the contribution, and of course the benefit at the end of the day. So you can use this present values method, right? Of course, they actually differ, but they are the same. We just need to discount everything to today's values because you are making a decision today, right? So we have this 3 method here. So we have what we call emerging cash flows, we have benefit event approach, and then of course we have commutation function. So I don't think this is like make any sense, right? Because why do we need the commutation function now? Right? Because we have very powerful machine. And again, commutation is not that flexible because you are defining this in a certain way. So limit some kind of flexibility here compared to, let's say, allowing the model with all the parameters. So of course, you can have this emerging cash flow. So the idea is very, very simple. Just discount this. Let's say you have the projected benefit, let's say for each year, right? The idea is just, simple. So you have all this projection, right? Per year, T1, T2, T3, up so forth, right? What you do is that you simply, find, the discounted value of all this amount. Then, of course, you sum them, right? Because remember here, we are taking these amounts, benefit for beneficiary K at time T, and then we discount this one here to, let's say, to a particular point or reference point, right? So it's called a bit emerging cash flows. I think because we consider, so this is actually per year, because the only difference with the next method is the next method actually is like you do this when the benefit is start to be paid. That is why we call it benefit. Sorry. Again, this is just the simple stuff, because you can expand this one here further because this is, yeah. So before I just took V and this one here, so just getting the present value of this benefit. But again, it's more complex, like what I said before, because you have to adjust for the probability of beneficiaries surviving to that age, right? And then of course you have to sum everything if we want to get the total benefit, right? I mean the total, benefit for all members and also for all the years. So I have to sum everything, right? Like that. So the key difference between this one here and the benefit event approach is that in benefit event approach, you can see that find the present value of this amount, at the point where this benefit starts. And maybe it's a simple approach, but sometimes it's a very complex approach because in this case here, it makes more sense if, let's say, you have 1 unit, right? Because remember, if I expect to start paying you here, if I start to paying you here, right? If I pay you, let's say this amount in fixed intervals, and this is actually the level amount. It's very easy because I simply need to take the benefits, and then of course I have to multiply with the annuity here, and then I'm done, right? And then of course I can discount this one here to any point which I want, like that, right? So it's a very easy approach because before I had to estimate, the benefit per year, like this one here, T2, T3, and so forth. And then of course after that, try, to discount this for each year and then sum everything together, right? But in benefit event approach, just like the name suggests, so I assume, let's say I start paying you the benefit at this point, and this is actually an annuity. So valuing an annuity is very, very easy, right? So the question is maybe like, what if, let's say, I have irregular amounts? The amounts are not of the same amount. So that now complicate, this, and maybe the previous approach becomes more robust if you want to compare these two approaches. But the idea is just, the same with like what we did before. We want to estimate the benefit, the present value of this benefit. So what do? We multiply with the probability of that event. And then of course we have the discount factor. And then of course we have the, so what is this again? So this is the value of the benefit at the event date. So the B. So yeah, I think it's very, very easy. So you have the probability, the discount factor, and then of course you multiply with the amount. So you get, what you need, right? So the key difference is like for the previous one, you do for each year, and then you find the present value of that. But for this one here, you just assume, let's say the event is at this point, and make more sense if, let's say, the payments are regular, and let's say fixed amount. So can use annuity ideas to find the value at that point and then discount that. So I think you can follow on this one here. Just an example that if the benefits are payable from, let's say, age 65 and the members are current age X, the period before the benefit start to be paid, of course, is 65 minus X because we're assuming the normal retirement age is 65, so minus X. Of course, it's actually the time until that will start to be paid, right? So you can see a general formula here. So it's just straightforward, I hope, because you are actually multiplying with the survival probability up to that point where the benefit will start to be paid, and then of course you are discounting this, and then of course this is the is actually the benefit. And then we have commutation factor. I don't know why we are considering this like a method anyway, but I think, like, if you remember, we use commutation. I think it's easy because we defined, some variables in such a way that is very easy, so we can use tables. So it made more sense, I think, before we have all this powerful machine nowadays. So I think this actually made the computation much, much easier, right? Because you can see, for instance, we say D is LX, of course, multiplied by VX. So of course, you can follow this, I think, but I think there is, nothing special about this using commutation. I hope we use commutation at some point, but I don't think if there is any reason why we should use commutation now, given that we have, all these, powerful machines. Yeah, so you can try to do this, but I cannot ask you a question about using commutation anyway. I don't know why, if there is any reason for me to do that. So I think I've already commented about this one here about the method. So one way, to think about this method is how flexible the method is, because that is actually very, very important, right? So we saw, for instance, if you do a projection for each year, and then for each individual, and then you try to find the present value, maybe that is a more flexible approach, because the second approach, assume, let's say you have something like annuity, so maybe not very powerful in that sense. And here I think the other comment is more about commutation, which does not make much sense anyway, right? Yeah, so you can read more about this, just the comments about the approaches. So here, stochastic models. So of course, all the methods which I explained before, they are deterministic models, right? They are deterministic models, right? But you can have, stochastic models of as well. So you will get like a full idea about different scenarios. And let's say maybe the possible values. So you can have, let's say, a range of the possible values, which is maybe more robust when it comes to making decisions. Yeah, so you can vary assumptions to maybe, and then observe what is the outcome if you change assumptions. So you can make more robust conclusions. And then we have, criteria, let's say, for choosing models. But at the end of the day, all this depends on the objective, right? What is the objective of building that model, right? And maybe the objective of the part which we want to use the results of of these models, right? So I think this criteria is just obvious, because you can see that we are saying, okay, it depends. So you have, let's say, stability of the contribution, right? Because if, let's say, the target is contribution, if you want to ensure, let's say, stability of the contribution, then what can you do? It means that you should be happy with the funding, right? Because if you fix contribution, then the funding can change, right? So what is the target, and what model can actually allows you to do that? Because you need to fix contribution, then allow the funding to vary, and then you can check the funding level against the expected benefit and see if that contribution rate actually allows you to achieve that. Because if not, of course, you'll have to adjust that. Or you can have a target which is security of the fund. So if the target is to have to ensure security of the fund, then you need to model which will you need a model which will allow you to let's say, to fix the funding, right? Because let's say you want to have a certain fund, because it's security, right? Security means that you need to make sure that the fund which you have will be enough to cover for all the projected benefit, right? So you need to have a model which will allow you to fix the fund which you want, of course, which is the target fund, and then of course they allow the contribution to vary. Because remember, for different levels of funding, you are going to have different levels of contribution. So are you happy with flexibility of the contribution or not? Because if the target is to fix the contribution, then you should have a model which will give you a fixed contribution, but then allow the funding to vary. And security is the opposite, because they need a model which will ensure security of the fund, but again, allow the contribution to vary. And then it may be realism. So how realistic that, let's say, that model is, to the real world application. Because remember, we are setting these models, but okay, so I don't know where I should talk about this one here, but the model which you are setting, right? We don't just, combine, say, okay, take this edge, put here, and then put a square and stuff like that, right? So it's all about asking yourself, why am I using this parameter in my model? Why, let's say, I have here, I'm taking edge square. Why edge square? Maybe I observe, let's say, a quadratic association between maybe edge and the benefit, right? And then how about the output which you get from there? Does that actually make sense, right? Or not, right? So it's all about how realistic, these models are to real world applications. And then of course we have consistency. So it's all about, I think, because when it comes to to valuation, remember, you are doing valuation of two things here. You have assets, and also you have the benefit, right? So you have the liabilities here. So you have to make sure that data is consistent, so let's say in terms of parameters, because you want to make sure that at the end of the day, you are comparing apple to apple. So if you're comparing apple to apple, you have to make sure that the assumption which you are using in valuation of assets align with the assumption you are using in valuation of the liabilities, right? Because otherwise, if let's say you have the discount rate, and here you are using maybe discount rate of 4%, right? And then maybe here you're using a discount rate of 2%. Then of course we're not compare this because they're not apple to apple anymore, right? So it's all about consistency in the assumption which you are making when it comes to evaluation of assets and the benefits. And then of course we have practicality here. So practicality is more about so it's more about how practical that that model is. And I think like the other thing which we typically consider here is cost effectiveness, right? Because remember, when running or implementing these models, sometimes you might need resources, right? So does what you want to achieve and the complexity may be involved justify that? So are they justified? Because if you use a complex model, and of course maybe the decision which need to be made is not that significant and stuff like that. Can you justify the cost involved in that? Or not, right? And I think like what I want to comment here again is that when using models, you have to be very careful again, because that is why we typically say, okay, we don't need a complex model, right? We don't need let's say maybe like the objective at the end of the day is to have a model which can be explained, right? Because maybe you have to present this model at some point. So are you able to explain how that model works in the corresponding output, right? Because you can have a model and it's something which is black box, right? You don't understand what is actually going on behind the scene. So, of course, when it comes to projects, maybe it's not a bigger issue, but sometimes you might be interested in solving explanation problem, right? So if you are interested in solving explanation problem, then of course you need a model which is maybe like a model which can be explained. You need maybe a parsimonious model, right? Because sometimes you can achieve, let's say, the same thing, the same objective or comparable results when using a simple model and a complex model. And the question is, why do you need a complex model now? Because I can get, almost the same result by simply using a simple model. And a simple model, is easy. I can explain this model. But sometimes even adaptability, right? Because you'll find sometimes that a simple model, is more adaptable to new data set, right? Compared to a complex model, right? So most of the time we say, okay, try to balance this thing, right? Because in running complex model, and remember, like you're doing valuation of pension fund here, right? So it's not a straightforward thing. So when I say you have a complex model, you have, let's say, a model with, let's say, 20 parameters. You need resources to do that, right? So is that justified? Can you justify that at the end of the day? Or you can simply achieve the same thing by using a simple model and stuff like that, right? So not interested all the time with complicated models. Sometimes just with simple models. We don't need complicated models. And sometimes like you cannot even explain how that model works. So is there any point of that? So it's just an extension, because this is just, I think I just took this from two sources. So just an extension here. So I just want to talk a bit about actuarial evaluation. So I will give you like the process in general, like in the next slide. So you start from here and then you go here and then you of course you end with this one here. So I just want to introduce this one here quickly. But at the end of the day, and this is not only in Tanzania, right? You are required to do this actual evaluation, right? This is a periodic process. So you'll have to do this, let's say, over a certain period of time. And in Tanzania, I think it's 3 years. So after 3 years, you have to conduct this actual evaluation. Why? Because I need to understand the financial position of the pension fund, right? So I have to check if my pension fund is heavy and maybe, right? And for me to be able to do that, I will have to compare. Because remember, I have promised to pay people, right? So does my fund have enough, let's say, enough asset to cover all the, let's say, all the accrued benefit, right? Maybe up to today. Do we have enough to do that, right? So you will have to check this. You will have to check this, over time. And the law will specify, like, okay, you have to do this after how long, right? So for us, it's 3 years. But now, we are not serious. So maybe, I don't know, like, so they say, they're doing, let's say, actual evaluation. I think it was in PSSF. I'm not sure if they have done it, right? So we can check that. But if you remember, like I shared last week, that CAG report, and one of the concern was no actual evaluation. It was, I think, 2023 report. So no actual evaluation was actually done. Since the merging and the harmonization, which was done by ILO, was completed, right? But it's something which you have to do regularly so as to check the health of the pension fund. Yeah, so and the key thing here, is like, because during actuarial evaluation, they actually have to recommend the contribution rate, right? Because you have to check that, okay, we have all these accrued benefit, right? And we have to compare all these accrued benefit with what we have today. So are we able to cover all the accrued benefit, right? And then, of course, we have something in the future, right? So we have to make sure that we set the contribution rate, which will be able to cover all the benefit which we expect to pay in the future, right? So one of the key things which need to come out of this actual evaluation is actually the contribution rate, right? Because they actually have to recommend the contribution rate, right? And we need this because this is actually what will allow us to cover all the expected benefit in the future. So of course, there are a number of objectives why we are doing this actual evaluation, but like what I said at the beginning, the first one is funding, right? And this is called a funding valuation. Why? Because we need to actually set, the contribution rate, which would allow us to cover all the projected benefit at the end of the day, right? So we have what we call a standard contribution rate, right? So a standard contribution rate is actually a contribution rate which ensures that the actual fund equals the standard fund, right? So the standard fund is like the target fund, right? So so it's the target fund. So you are saying, okay, maybe up to this point, right? So we have this let's say this projected benefit, right? So which we have to cover, right? So how much should we need to have so that the actual fund will actually equal to the standard fund, right? So I will show you, because we have a different method of estimating this, and of course this will differ depending on the method which you actually use. So the contribution rate will depend on the method, right? And that's why we are saying that it depends on the objective. So what do you want to achieve at the end of the day, right? So we have 3D method, which I'm going to introduce, but there are other methods, of course, which you can take a look later. And then, of course, I will discuss a bit about harmonization now, because you can set a contribution rate, but sometimes we can have either surplus at the end of the day, or you can have deficit. So if you have surplus or deficit, of course, at the end of the day, you have to adjust the contribution rate again, right? So I will introduce some approaches. How can we harmonize now the deficit or the surplus to make sure that at least we align the standard fund and the actual fund. Of course, you can do actual evaluation because of commercial transaction, like what we had, let's say, before in 2014, like you're trying to merge pension fund. Of course, you need to understand the value and the liability of all these pension funds, right? Let's say in case if there is a merger or acquisition, this can be one of the trigger why maybe actual evaluation need to be done, right? So yeah, so we have a good example, because we have ILO actual evaluation report from 2014. And this was actually to assess, the financial the financial positions of all pension funds at that time, and then of course do some recommendations about merging, right? So this can be one of the reasons why this is done. And then of course this is actually for accounting reasons, but also like what I said, just regulation, you have to do this, right? Maybe the regulation might say that, okay, you have to make sure that the funding is maintained, let's say, within a particular range, right? So you have maybe the minimum or maybe have the maximum. So you have to make sure that maybe you are within maybe the required range and stuff like that, right? But for us, I think it's just something which is stated that you have to do this, I mean, after every 3 years, of course, to check, I mean, if your fund is actually still robust. So I'm going to introduce, I mean, some assumptions here, like what I said, that we can have demographic assumptions, we can have economic assumptions when it comes to projections. So I'm going to use, I mean, a number of notations here. So I have, let's say, V. So V is just, I mean, the discount rate, which is to determine the present values. We have J, the rate of general salary escalation. And then, of course, we have C, the rate of increase in pension payment, and G is the rate of pension in deferment, right? So just remember this. So V is common, J is for salary growth, and then we have C for increase in pension, which are in payment, and then we have, of course, G, which is increase in pension, which are in deferment. So in deferment, it means that someone retire, let's say today, but the plan rule might restrict, let's say, the benefit. So you have to wait until retirement for you to be able to receive this benefit. So I'm going to note that by G, right? And then, of course, you can have promotional salary scale like this one here. So I'm going to note this one here by S. So remember, this is actually the growth in salary, and is more because of seniority, right? So it depends on age. So I mean, this is noted by S of X. And then I'm going to make other assumptions as well, especially, I mean, demographic assumptions. So I'm going to note, let's say, D, of course, number of active members who are age X. I mean, dying before X plus 1. So we have death. Of course, we have withdrawal. Of course, we have the early retirement before age X plus 1. And then, of course, we have, IX, which is actually expected number of members who actually take ill health retirement before age X plus 1. So D for death, W for withdrawal, and then we have R for early retirement, right? And then, of course, we have I for illness. And then, of course, we have this standard, I think. So we have LX is actually the expected number of active members who actually survive until age X. And then we have this one here is for pensioners, for deferred pensioners, sorry. So those who actually defer. So they have to wait until retirement for them to start to receive the benefit, right? So I hope you remember that. So this is for deferred, if you see LPX. So of course we can have this valuation formula for this. And so I'm going to denote again here that we can have salary, because remember, at the end of the day, if we're talking about benefit, with no benefit, we need to have the accrual rate, we need to have the salary, and then of course we need to have the number of years and stuff like that, right? So we need salaries. So I'm going to define salary like this one here. So this is the pensionable salary, sum for all active members, and then I can have P. So P is just the pensionable salary, but this one here we multiply with the past service, and then this is sum for all active members HX, and then we have this. This is actually the pension payment, sum for all pensioners HX, and then we have the DPEN that simply denote the deferred pension, right? Yeah. And then, of course, we have to, because remember, we are talking about benefits, so we need to make assumptions as well about the accrual rate. So we have the accrual rate, which is K, and then we have the annuity, so expected present value of benefit on voluntary or normal retirement. So we are just using the same annuity notation. And then in case if there is illness, then of course we are going to note that by I. So you can see here, I'm adding this one here, I for illness. So I for illness, W for withdrawal, and then R for retirement. So this is going to be early retirement. So I'm going to estimate two things here, depending on the benefit which I'm talking about. Because remember, we said before that you can have different type of benefits. So you can have, let's say, you can have early retirement, you can have retirement at normal age, you can have because of death, you can have because of withdrawal and stuff like that. So I'm just going to start with the retirement. And this retirement, remember, include early retirement. So I'm going to note the present value of active members' retirement benefits from accrued service. So A is from accrued service, 1 is from the next year of service. So 1 year, right? So it's the present value of the retirement benefit from next year of service. So just do 1 year projection here. And then of course you can see this one here. This is for all the future years. So we just consider all the future years, right? So that is the key difference. So A for accrued, and then 1 for next year, and then of course F for all future years. So you can see the formula for all these liabilities in case of retirement will look like this one here. Because I'm summing for all members. So at the end of the day, I'm summing for all members, right? And then of course I'm multiplying with the accrual rate. I mean, it just resembles like what you have here, that N, S, and then of course you have this one here, which we saw before in simple terms. And that's why here that you can see for this one here, I'm multiplying this here with the pensionable salary, right? Pensionable salary, I mean, from accrued service. So that is a P from the past service, right? And then you can see that what I'm doing here is that, because I remember in this case, you can take retirement at any age, right? I mean, of course, up to normal retirement. That is the assumption we are making. But you have to adjust for survival probabilities. So you can see here, this is actually the probability that you'll survive up to the, to that period. So if you are age X today, will you be able to survive up to that age? I mean, the retirement age. And then of course here, remember, I'm just adjusting the salary, because remember the salary will not remain constant, the salary will grow. So I have to take S of X, and then of course S of Z. So we have, growth of salary. So this is just, general salary growth, we noted by J, maybe because of inflation per year, right? You'll have, let's say, change in like in your salary, or increase in your salary, but it can also be because of promotion, right? Because maybe of seniority. So that is actually S and then SZ. And then of course we are discounting everything, and then of course we are multiplying this with the annuity factor, right? Because the benefit will be paid in terms of annuity, right? So you can see, all these formulas will look the same. So you can see now I have this here from accrued service, and this here from 1 year. Yeah, so it's actually the present value of the benefit from the next year of service. So here I don't need to use the accrued salary. So just use this here pensionable salary at age X, and then of course I'm summing for all members, and then of course we can see that I'm doing all this adjustment like what I did before, right? And this one here is for all future years, but the idea is actually the same. So instead of actually taking that for just a single year, do projection for a single year, just do projection for all the future years, right? So remember, this normal, I get the normal retirement age. And of course, this one here make more sense, right? Because if you retire, yeah, this is actually, yeah, so retirement and normal retirement age is just the same with, yeah, because all those who survive up to the normal retirement age, right? You will have to retire, right, at the normal retirement age. So that should be true anyway, right? So that is for the retirement benefit. but you can also have, members who also withdraw from pension fund, right? So of course, this is just general illustration, but we can also have members who retire from pension fund. And we are going to make an assumption here that, those who withdraw from pension fund, they will have to wait until the normal retirement age for them to start to receive the benefit, right? So this is the assumption we are making here, but might not be true in other pension fund, right? Just an assumption here that if you withdraw from the pension fund, you have to wait until the normal retirement age. So I'm defining like what I did before here, but you can see I'm using different notation. So I'm using W for withdraw. So notice the time. Yeah. So I'm using W for withdraw here, right? So you can see that, okay, so I have, present value of active member withdraw benefit from accrued service for A, and then 1 from next year of service, and then of course F for from all future years of service. So you can see, this will almost look like what we had before. So the only thing here is that I think what is a bit different, because you can see everything is the same. So this is for the accrued benefit. And then, of course, I have to discount this, right? Why? Because for someone, to start receiving this benefit, they have to wait until retirement, right? So you have to discount everything from the retirement age to the, to the current age. And then, of course, we have this one here. Again, the same adjustment that, okay, what is the probability that, someone will withdraw from the pension plan, right? And then, of course, you can see in this case here, again, I have to include, like, what is the probability that if your age Z, you'll actually survive up to the normal retirement age, right? Because that is the point where you start to receive these benefits. Then, of course, same adjustment here. Of course, salary growth will also be included. But you can see that they have the annuity here, outside, because they expect, this to start working, from the retirement age going forward. Right, so at the time when you retire is the time where, of course, you'll be able to receive your benefit if you actually receive from the pension fund. And then, of course, we are summing all this for our members. And the other benefit so which we covered before is active members ill health benefit. So remember, I'm denoting this one here by letter I. So the idea is the same here. We can adapt the same formula. Like what we have done for the withdrawal, for the normal retirement, especially, of course, for the normal retirement. Right? But we said, generally, ill health benefit tend to be more generous because people don't choose to be ill. Just occur, right? So generally, the benefit tend to be somehow generous. And I said, if you remember that generally you have, let's say, benefit estimated as, let's say, like a fraction of salary, right? A certain fraction of salary. So their formula tend to be somehow different, like what we saw before. So I'm going to denote, two things here. And because we don't care much about the accrued service, at least here, right? Because you can have, as a pension fund which consider that, but overall we know that these tend to be more generous. So you can see here I don't have any accrued a reference here. So I just have, let's say, from the next year of service and also from all future services as well. So you can see here, this is just, an example of how this can be computed. So you can see that I'm taking a fraction. So I just have the salary here. And then, of course, I'm taking the probability, of, the probability that someone will actually become ill. And then, of course, they just multiply with the annuity factor at that point, right? So then, of course, we sum for everyone. And then, of course, for the next one, of course, we are making some references here to salary growth and stuff like that, right? So for all future years, now we can simply use this second approach here. But you can see this somehow different because we are, instead of multiplying with the accrual here, multiplying this fraction, which will actually be defined by the pension fund anyway. So I'm going to read here more. And the other one is actually active member death before retirement. Of course, you can have death after retirement, which is another case. So in this case, I'm just going to give an example for death before retirement. So in this case, of course, remember, if you die, it's not you who is going to receive the benefit, right? So your beneficiaries are going to receive the benefit, right? So the benefit which will be paid, let's say, to your spouse, first of all, we depend on the so it will be like a function, right? Is actually dependent, right? Because I'm the one who is going to die, let's say, right? But someone else is going to receive that. So see, the way I'm indicating my unit is not maybe like A of X, no, because A is just a function. So you have, let's say, Y, maybe Y is the wife, right? But this is actually a function. It's a function of is a function of X. And typically, we tend to assume this one here. So we typically assume that the age difference between a husband and a wife is 3 years, right? So it's simply 3 years, like this one here. So if you take X minus 3, of course, you get, the Y. So the age of the dependent who is going to receive this, not dependent, sorry. Let's say the spouse who is going to receive this death benefit will be a function of X, right? So this is actually what we are saying here. So I don't know if this is a robust assumption or maybe it's more conservative approach. I don't know. But typically, here, like the example suggests, the gap will be 3 years, but it can be 5 years. So depending on the assumption made by the pension fund and the assumption which they find to be robust. Remember, we said before that assumption is one of the key input when it comes to these projection models. So we'll have to make an assumption like this one here. So what should be the assumed gap between let's say a woman and a man, right? So if the assumption are very close to the reality, then of course you'll see your projection almost accurate. They align. So at the end of the day, if you compare, let's say, the standard fund and the actual fund, you'll find that they're almost close. Why? Because the assumption which you are made were robust assumption. Otherwise, I mean, you're going to see some deviation. And if you're going to see some deviation, of course, you'll have to adjust your contribution at the end of the day, because the target fund actually differs from the actual one. So I'm going again to denote here. So the idea is the same, because this benefit tend to be more generous compared to, let's say, other benefit like let's say if you withdraw early and stuff like that. You can see that I don't make reference to the past service here, right? So just ignore the accrued one, and you can see the formulas are pretty much close to the ill health, like what we said in the previous lecture, that these two benefits generally tend to be almost the same, right? I mean, almost similar like that. So you can see in this case here that we have the present value of the death benefit from the next year of service, and we are taking, the fraction. This is actually the fraction of salary, right? So we are summing, for all members, we are taking the salary, and then we are multiplying with the proportion of members who are married at that time at HX, right? Because remember, this is more relevant to those who are married. If you're not married, then this is not relevant to you. So that is why you can see that here we are multiplying the proportion of active members who are married at that point, right? And then, of course, we are multiplying with a probability that a member who is HX, of course, will die during that year. And then, of course, we have, this annuity. So you can see the annuity here is a function. It's a function of X, because we say that we can define the age of the spouse like this one here, because we assume the spouse will be younger, right? Younger than let's say, maybe a woman is, I don't know. So generally is a woman younger than a man. So if you have, let's say, a man younger than a woman, I think you will always have problems, right? So it's a general assumption, but suppose it's spouse, so it's just the gap with 3 years, right? That is, it can be either way. And then, of course, we have pensioners and deferred pensioners as well. So I'm going to use, PVA as the present value of benefit due to pensioners. And of course, I'm going to use, PVA DP as the present value of benefit due to deferred pensioners, right? So what I'm going to do here now is that, of course, because this is from past service, right? So I have the present value of this pension from past services. This is actually the pension which are in payment, right? So they're in payment. So if they're in payment, you just need to take, the sum here. So the pension, of course, multiplied by the annuity factor. And then, of course, for deferred, because they have to wait until normal retirement. So you can see I'm doing this adjustment here, that they will receive this from the normal retirement age, of course, going forward. And then, of course, I'm multiplying this with the deferred pension amount. And then, of course, they have the probability of survival of the normal retirement, because they'll start to receive this at the normal retirement. So we have to adjust for the probability that they will survive until the normal retirement age, right? And then, of course, we have to discount this to to the reference point. Okay. So now we have seen, how this benefits. So we have seen benefits, for the case of retirement, for the case of retirement, which can be early retirement, for withdrawal, for death, and also for illness, right? So we have like 4 type of benefits. So I'm going to combine this, because remember, we estimated the present value of benefit from accrued service. Also, we have the okay, so just 1 second. yeah, so this is the problem here. So just okay, so sorry, I've been naona wamekata umeme, kwa hiyo what happened ni kwamba I was using external desktop, so everything disappeared and seems like it may stuck. So just give me a few seconds. I'm setting this up. So just 1 second. I hope you can hear me. This is weird. So now external monitor. Oh, so I'll just end this and then I will reopen it. Sabu, it seems like he's still assuming that I have external monitor and I don't have it now. Yeah, so apologies for that. Yeah, so alikuwa amekata umeme and then I was using this external monitor, so everything disappeared after that. And it seems like Zoom was assuming that my external monitors are still working. So it was, yeah, so apologies for that. So what I was saying here, maybe to check, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you, Esme. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. Okay, so let me continue. Okay, thank you, Samil. So let me close this one here. Okay, so what I was saying here that now, of course, you can see, because remember the idea here. I mean, where am I coming from? So the idea is like we are trying to determine the contribution. So we are assuming like we are doing funding valuation. And remember, the key idea in funding valuation that we have to determine the contribution rate, right? So that is why what I'm doing here, that I've just started to estimate the benefit, like the total benefit, I mean, per each type. So we can have because of retirement, because of death and stuff like that. So now I want to combine all the total liabilities, right? So you can see here that I'm taking the present value, of the benefit from accrued service, right? So this is the present value of the retirement benefit. So this is R from retirement, and then I'm summing from withdraw, and then I'm summing, this is actually from pensioners. So this is accrued, right? And that is why, so this is actually accrued, and that's why here I'm adding this is actually the present values of the benefit because of pensioners, because we are paying benefit. We have ongoing pension, right? And then we have a group of members who we have promised them that will give you pension, but they have to survive until normal retirement. So this is deferred. So we are also adding here, the deferred benefit, right? And then of course you can see here that here I have, from next year of service. So you can see that I'm adding, from retirement, from withdrawal, from illness, and then of course from death as well, right? And then of course I have present value from all future services. So I'm combining across all these type of service of benefit which we have. So you can see that now, because I want to determine a contribution, and remember contribution is actually a percentage of salary. It's actually a proportion of salary. So it means that if I need to know the contribution, I need to know the liability first, and then of course I need to know the salaries, right? So here I'm just going to denote PVSAL as the present value of the next year pensionable salaries. And then of course PVFSL as the present value of the pensionable salaries over all future services. Right. So we have from all and from the next year of service. So this denotes from next year of service, and this one here denotes from all future services. So now we can see, we can define this one here. So the present value, of salary from next year of service is simply the sum of all salaries. And then, of course, from all future years, of course, we'll have to take into account this, because remember, salaries will grow. So we expect to have, this one here included here as well. And then, of course, we're discounting this one here. And then, of course, we're including, survivors up to, to that age. So now let us see, this funding method, which are method for actually estimating the contributions. So the first one is, okay, so maybe before I do that, let me define SCR as the standard contribution rate. And then of course we have SAF for the standard fund, right? So standard fund, you will see that in our method, we are setting the standard fund, equal to the, sorry, just 1 second. Yeah, so, sorry. So it's like, the standard fund is like the target, right? So we have, this accrued benefit up to this point. So this is what we call a standard fund, right? So that in all this method, we have to make sure that, this is like the target. It means that at that point, you should be able to cover all the present values of the benefit from accrued services, right? So in this case here, let me start with the first method. So you can see the first method is called, projected unit method. So projected unit, so just, a unit, so like 1 year, right? So just a single point. And you can see that the way we define it is like standard contribution rate is just, equal to the present value of the benefit from next year of service. And of course, we define with the present value of the pensionable service from next year of service. So you can see that if you get this here, this is simply the, sorry, just can I write here? Okay. So you can see, this one here is simply, so if you take this multiply by that, is like you're saying, okay, what is the proportion of salary which I need to be able to fund, the present value of the liability from next year of service, right? So that is called, a standard contribution rate, but this will be according to this method, because other a method actually make reference to other type of liabilities, right? And you can see here, the standard fund, is simply equal to the present value of liability from accrued services, right? So if the actual fund equals the standard fund, then of course we're in safe side, because it means that we are able to cover all the liabilities from the accrued service. Otherwise, we're in problem, right? And that is why, if you remember before, I say that we have to make sure that the contribution in which we set will actually bring, at any point, will bring, the standard fund equal to the present value, equal to the actual fund, right? Because if you have this one here equal to the actual fund, then of course you're in good shape, right? Otherwise, you are in problem. So the other method is called the attained age method. So I hope this again is straightforward, like the name suggests here. Maybe not this one here, I think the next one, right? So in this case, of course, you have the standard contribution. So this is making reference to all future years. So you can see here we are taking the present value of the benefits from all future years, right? And then of course we are we're taking the present value of all benefits from the future year of service, and of course we are dividing this with the present value of the pensionable salary from all future year of service. So it's just, the same thing, but you can see the reference point is a bit like the reference is a bit different, because here we are making reference to all future years, right? So this is called, the attained age method, like that, right? Because here target is the same. We want to make sure that the standard fund equals to actual fund, right? Which equal to the present value of all accrued benefit. So if you assess your pension and you find that and you find that the actual fund, equals the standard fund, of course, you are in a good position, right? Otherwise, of course, you have to do some revision. So of course, it's just, a comment. You can read more about this one here. For instance, we are saying, of course, the standard contribution rate, if you compare projected unit and attained age method, of course, you expect this AM, of course, to be, just 1 second here. I think this one here is expected, because if I find the contribution rate and a projected unit method, this will be less, right? Than the contribution rate, if I use attained age method, right? This is expected, because in attained age, of course, we are using reference, for all future years, right? So of course, the contribution needed to fund all liabilities from all future years, I think it will be higher than, of course, what you need to fund just next year of service, right? So of course you can read more about that one here. And then the other method is called entry age method, right? So entry age method is, like the name suggests, like you value this, you find, the contribution rate when, like, let's say an individual join actually the plan. So this is why we are using, X naught, right? So we denote PVF as the present value of future benefit due to a new entrant aged X naught, right? So based on salary projected. So this is maybe a bit complicated, because you have to do projection. So I'm joining the pension plan today now, let's say at age X naught, right? So you have to do projection of all future benefits. And then of course you have to do a projection of projected salaries, right? And the way to operate is just like what we did before. So we have to find how, like, what percentage of salary do we need to be able to fund all this benefit, right? In total, of course. So you can see that in this case here, you have this one here, and then this one, just like before, this is the present value of the benefit. And then you have this one here, the present value of the salary from all future years for a new entrant HX naught, right? So you can see, this one here, this is called the standard contribution rate under the entry age method, right? So you can see, however, the standard fund is defined a bit different, because before we simply had this present value, of the benefit from accrued service. But now, of course, because we are considering, like everything, right? At one point, we're doing all evaluation at one point when the member joined the plan. You can see in this case that we end up having, so we're adding this one here, present value of the benefit from all future services, right? So this one here is like the total benefit, right? This one here is like the total. This one here is like the total benefit, right? Like the total liabilities. So we are subtracting this one here, right? Because this part here is like saying this part will be funded by the contribution, right? So that is like the future part, right? Which will be funded by the contribution. So maybe we don't need that now, because remember, this is the contribution which will be required, to fund this one here. So maybe we should try maybe to remove that part from these total liabilities, right? So yeah, you can find an easy way to understand this one here, but you can see that because we are doing everything when the member joined the plan, then of course the only difference I think is just the standard fund, but everything just remains like what we had before, right? So this method I expected to give you different contribution rate, and that is why it's very important that you understand what is the objective of doing this actual evaluation, right? Because that will actually guide you on which method maybe you should use to ensure that you met the objective which are targeted. So the other thing which I want to comment here is about deviation, because remember I said we have to make sure that the actual fund equals the standard fund at the end of the day. If we have that, then of course we are in a good position because we can use the contribution to fund all future liabilities, right? But the problem is that most of the time you'll have these two different. So you'll get, the difference between this one here not equal to zero. So either is less or is greater than zero, right? But not equal to zero. It means that I think almost the time. It's very challenging to have actual fund equal, standard fund. I don't think that is achievable, right? But at least, we have something which we can make reference and make a decision based on, right? So all the time we have to compare the actual fund and the standard fund, right? So we can have either excess, which is a good thing. It means that the actual fund exceeds the standard fund. It means that you have more than enough to cover, all the liability from the past services, right? So, sorry, from the accrued benefit, right? So if you're able to do that, of course, we're in good position, right? And you have more, right? So what can you do if you have more? You can either maybe increase the benefit, or you can adjust the contribution rate and stuff like that, right? But you'll have to compare it. And if you have deficit, then the implication that you'll have to adjust the contribution, right? So this is actually what we are trying to explain here, that, okay, in case if you have, let's say, deficit or you have surplus, then of course you'll have to adjust the contribution. So here we are making an assumption that the adjustment which you do in this case is not on the benefit, right? It's not like you are going to adjust the benefit. No, the adjustment if you have surplus or deficit is on adjusting the contribution only, right? But you can have other option like that, right, where you adjust the benefits. So the first method is amortization of surplus or deficit, right? So of course you amortize this, of course, over a selected period. So let me show you here, right? So this is actually what do we do? I think just straightforward here, right? Because remember, I have this one here, standard fund, subtract, of course, this here funding, and then of course I'm trying to amortize this over a given period. I don't know, I can define this, right? So I have to choose what is going to be my N, right? So N can be 10 years. So I want to amortize this over 10 years. But it depends, right? Because so it's like you'll have to find a balanced time period here, because if you just, let's say, adjust this for 2 years or 1 year, then remember the implication. The implication will be fluctuation in the contribution rate. So if the target is to have a stability in the contribution rate, maybe you should have to consider the time period. Maybe use 5 years or maybe 10 years and stuff like that, depending on the objective, right? But what this formula is telling you is that, okay, you can have this one here. Okay, so you can have the first scenario where the standard fund is higher than the actual fund, right? If we have that scenario, it means that this number here will be positive, right? If it's positive, then, okay, so sorry, standard fund higher than the actual. Okay, so if we have positive, then what is the implication? Because here we are defining the adjusted contribution rate. So the revised contribution rate here, of course, will be the standard contribution rate, which we estimated it before. And then, of course, because this here is positive, it means that your contribution will go up, right? So if the standard fund, which is the present value of all the benefit from our past services, then what we, okay, just the accrued benefit, maybe let me use that term, not to confuse you, right? So what is happening in this case here, that if the standard fund is higher than the actual, it means that what we have today is not enough to cover, all the accrued benefit, right? And if that is the case, it means that we have to increase, the contribution, right? So in that case, you'll see that, of course, this contribution here will actually go up. Why? Because we know the standard fund here, is higher than the actual fund. And then the implication will be vice versa, because if, let's say, the actual fund, which is noted by F, is less than the standard fund, it means that you have more than enough, right? So if F is higher than the standard fund, it means that you have more than enough, right, to cover all the accrued benefit. So if that is the case, you'll see that this term here will be negative, right? So if this is negative, it means that this adjusted contribution rate will actually be here negative, so this contribution will actually go down, right? So that is the idea, right? So as long as, the standard fund, right, is higher than the actual, we have a problem, so we have deficit, so we'll have to adjust the contribution upward. But vice versa is also true, because if the contribution, if I mean the actual fund is actually higher than the salary fund, of course, then the adjustment will be on the opposite. So it will be a negative. So it will reduce the contribution rate. So that is the general idea here. And the other thing which I want to, of course, this is what I was talking about, that of course you'll have to choose the optimal period. Because if the period in which you do this amortization is shorter, then the implication is that you are likely to have fluctuations, right? So are you okay with fluctuation? Because most of the time, like what you remember, like what we said, I think in the topic which we covered, funding, we said stability is one of the issue here, right? We also have to consider how stable the contributions are at the end of the day. Then we have, remaining service life. So the idea is actually the same. The way we adjust the contribution that remains the same, except the way we compute the adjusted or revised contribution rate here, right? So the adjusted contribution rate, of course, will depend again on this one here, the difference between the actual and this one here. And I think what is important here is that we are assuming this pension fund is close to new, so it's not taking any new entrance here, right? So that is why we are calling it, remaining service lives. So you just, divide this by the present value of the pensionable salary from all future services and stuff like that, right? So again, the way you adjust the contribution rate just remain like what we had before. So you can see here the adjusted will actually depend on this value here. So as long as positive, you adjust upward. As long as negative, it will actually reduce, the contribution rate. And then, of course, we have independent amortization, which is actually gain. So independent amortization, it's just like, I think it can use any approach which we have discussed before. But the idea here is that you do this. Okay, so we have, two approaches here. So we have an approach which is common in US, where they actually, consider this, they do, adjustment of the contribution, from year to year, let's say, right? So, it's like you say, maybe from, let's say like you're doing this evaluation, maybe like almost every year. So you have an idea about whether you have deficit or you have surplus, right? So if that is the case, then you just, do adjustment, let's say, per each year. So you consider like, okay, so what is the deficit is this year? Maybe it's 10%. Then of course, maybe let me go back here, right? So like, let's say here you find maybe, okay, this year, let's say we find that this is higher. So you estimate this one here, and then maybe you get, let's say, minus 2%, right? So take this 2%, of course, you just put here, and then you adjust the contribution. So next year, again, you just do this evaluation. Okay, so what is the difference here? Okay, maybe it's positive 10%, right? So we expect this to go up by 10%. So you adjust this one here, right? So you do this, let's say, per year, right? So it's more frequently. Like in UK here, we are simply saying they typically, consider like a longer period, right? So it's like interval, maybe after 3 years. So consider maybe during these 3 years. So I have, let's say, these 3 years, and then we are doing here maybe this adjustment. Then you say, okay, from this year, if I look here, so the net maybe is, let's say, plus 10. So we have to adjust this maybe plus 10. And then, of course, you have to wait maybe for another, let's say, I don't know, maybe 3 years, and then you just do that. So, a bit longer time compared to, let's say, what they do in US, right? But it's independent. You do this year, and then next year is another issue. Compare that, then you do it, and then like that. So it's actually independent. We consider this independent, and you adjust the contribution rate accordingly. But again, the implication is actually like what we said. Because now you're going to have the contribution rate which fluctuates over time, and maybe that is not a good idea. It's not a good, funding approach anyway. So here, you can have, so I have this example here. Of course, I will not do this for you, because these are, I think you can get this example in this book. So this example is actually in this book. So just go and then look at this book. It's a very simple question. It's not like it's very complicated. So as long as you understood, how we combined, all the liabilities to get the total liabilities, and then how we computed the contribution rate by using this method, then of course this approach I mean, of course, you can apply this approach. I think there is nothing strange here. Then, of course, we have valuation of assets, but I typically don't cover this valuation of assets because just like if you've done finance, I think this should be straightforward to you. So I typically don't cover this one here, right? But in case if you're interested, I mean, you can just take a look here further. Of course, I mean, we have some questions. I don't remember if we have questions about valuation of asset, which I will share in tutorials. But I think you can read that because it's actually worth reading. But I'm not sure if I will ask you this in the final exam. Okay, so any question up to that point? So I don't have my monitor here, so I have to switch it to charts here so that I can actually check this one here. Okay, so any question up to that point? Okay, so if there is no any question, I just want to highlight this one here, which is actually like the I mean the summary of like what we have said in general, and is so just I mean the same thing here, right? But I just want like to show you like the full process now, how this is done. So just I mean a brief lecture here that actually evaluation process. So of course you're going to have some preparation, right? You'll have to you're going to have some data collection and analysis, because I mean generally speaking, like I consider all this actual evaluation just like data analysis process, right? Because I think you have seen, I mean, there is nothing strange. It's like you are doing data analysis, right? You have data, you have age, you have when the member join, you have, I mean, like occupation of these members. You'll have to estimate the probabilities. So what is the probability that this member is going to die? Now it depends. If you have good data, of course, you can estimate, let's say, the chance of dying across occupation, and then you can use that in your projection. But the idea is that, I mean, this is just like a data analysis process, I can say that, and of course and modeling. So it's like the statistical modeling process. So you can see, I mean, the way this works. So you have preparation, you have data collection and analysis, you have model building and adjustment. Of course, you have to select some assumptions and indicators. Then you have to fit the model, and yeah, it's fitting the model. Of course, it's not building the model, I can say that. Because you know what I mean, building the model is like you're starting everything from scratch, right? So I think that is why they're using fitting of the model. Yeah, but yeah, of course you can adjust your model depending on the assumption in which you think they make more sense, especially from the perspective of modeling and stuff like that, right? Then base running and result analysis, sensitivity testing. Of course, I've said this at some point that it's very important that you check how sensitive your results are. And stuff like that, right? Because when you are presenting this, people will ask, right? I mean, they will ask because they will say, okay, we assumed maybe inflation rate is 1%, right? So if you say we assume inflation rate was 1%, then people will ask, okay, so what if, let's say, inflation rate turn out to be, let's say, maybe 2%? What is going to happen? What is the implication at the end of the day? Are we going to remain like given the contribution rate which you have suggested? Do you think, I mean, the plan will remain robust, I mean, if these assumptions changes, right? So that is why sensitivity is very, very important, because it gives you an idea about what is going to happen. It's like scenario analysis, right? I mean, it's like what is going to happen if, let's say, something goes different from what you expected. Okay, so I think it's just, I mean, the repetition, because just the starting point of this one here, that I think this is the preparation, right? Sorry, I don't see this one here. Okay, yeah, so it's preparation, right? So you'll have to prepare yourself. So define what is the objective and the scope of your evaluation, right? So so I hope you have seen that actually your evaluation by ILO, right? So they define the scope, right? I mean, we are doing this actual evaluation because of this and this and this one here, right? Maybe you want to recommend, okay, so at the end of the day, we want to see if there is any value of this pension funds merging, because we think that is a more maybe like this will result into pension funds which are more robust, more efficient, and stuff like that. So you need to have an objective, and what is going to be the scope of that actual evaluation, right? So it's all about preparation here. So of course you can read here more. I hope you can do that. And then of course data collection. And I think this is actually one of the most important parts here, because I think there is a comment here that in actual evaluation, you will find at the end of the day that data collection maybe and analysis take like 75% of the time, especially in countries where data issues is very, very like challenging, right? It's not like it's straightforward where you have data which are recorded in a more robust way, right? So of course I will have to spend a lot of time here preparing the data, formatting the data, and stuff like that. Of course, type of data here, I think we've already explained that you might need, demographic data, economic data, right? Legal provision of pension funds. So you'll have to read all these guidelines because you have acts which guide these pension funds. So you'll have, to understand all this, right? Especially if, let's say, because most of the time they use, actuaries from other countries. So if, let's say, you are from UK and you are coming here to do actual evaluation, of course, you'll have to familiarize yourself with everything, including, legal provisions and stuff like that, right? And then, of course, contributors, and then beneficiaries, and then, of course, dependents of insured parties. So basically, just data analysis exercise. Of course, you'll have to analyze your data for consistency and stuff like that, just like the way you have been given. If you have the data, right? If you have the data, you'll have to check all these things. They are obvious, right? It does not matter whether you're doing a true evaluation or not. You have to make sure that your data are consistent. So all 6 dimensions of data quality need to be addressed here. You have to make sure that your data are reliable at the end of the day, right? So consistency and validation. You can see here we'll have to do some reconciliation maybe with data used in the previous evaluation. Very importantly, because we have to ensure consistency. So if, let's say, like maybe the last evaluation was done in 2020, for instance, right? The data which I'm using, because I already have data from 2020 going backward, right? So now if I'm going to use Actuarial, I'm going to run, let's say, Actuarial evaluation now, I cannot use different data sets, right? So I have to at least, try to maintain the same assumptions if they are reasonable, and so that at least we can compare, right? We can make some comparison and stuff like that. So very, very important. Yeah, so we can check all these data issues as well. Again here, yeah, of course, yeah, consistency and validation, possible check, of course. Include, yeah, checks on the use of values on data set randoms. So all these are minor issues, right? Of course, unusual values, outliers, inconsistency, and stuff like that. Do you have missing values? And now how are you going to address that? Are you going to impute? Are you going to, I don't know, are you going to drop some observation and stuff like that? So just like the way you do statistical analysis, is actually the same thing here. Yeah, so poor quality data in Safi. Okay, so I don't think you have to comment this. I think you can read on your own. This is like what we mean when we say sufficiency of the data. So I hope you can simply read this. I don't want to cover one point to another, because you have to develop a proper demographic and economic assumptions, perform required actual evaluation. So the data should allow you to do all this kind of analysis for that data to be considered sufficient. Reliability, relevant, complete. This is simply data issues, so you can do that. Model building, of course, like you'll have to make decision about the model, so model choice. So which model do you need? How are you going to estimate the parameters? Which is the robust way of estimating the parameters? What is the objective? Is it simply projection? Am I going to have to explain something, right? So I have the model which can easily be like the output which can be explained, or I don't have to care much about that because I just need a model which can project you well, because you will have a trade-off like this, right? So you can take a further look on that. Sensitivity analysis, we've already discussed about that. Yeah, so it was not my plan anyway, like to cover this, because it's just like the repetitions, right? Yeah, so of course you'll have to check the goodness of it, or use QQ. So this is a very simple approach, right? So this is just many examples. I'm not saying that you'll have to use QQ program to check if the assumption of your model are met. No, I'm just saying, okay, you can check if, let's say the assumption of your model are met by using different goodness of fit approach. But because you'll be running, serious analysis, of course, even the measurement of goodness of it need to be robust as well, right? It's not like you just use QQ plot, right? Because that will just give you an idea, but you cannot use like that is, yeah, because it's very subjective, I think. So you'll have to use more robust approaches to check the goodness of fit. Okay, did that on that more. Of course, selection of assumptions, we've already covered this one here. Yeah, all these assumptions okay, so feeding the model, so you have to run the model here. Yeah, so in case if you have any question here, please let me know. But just the summarization of what we have already covered, right? If you need to run some simulation, of course, writing the report, and then of course you have to present the findings. So it's just the workflow of how this works. And it's all about the yeah, so it covers everything which we have already discussed up to this point. So let me stop here, unless if you have any question up to this point, which I'm happy to take. So any question? Just 1 second. Okay, so I think Nosten is upload early ndo alinasuswe si unaandika ali. You don't like your name? You have a very good name, my friend. Just write in full. Let's come as your so okay, so what I want to say here, yeah, so I will upload the notes. Yeah, so nadhani nilishare baadhi ya notes before, so just complete that. And yeah, so I will upload nadhani baadaye, including the tutorials, because we have tutorials, we have very good questions as well, so I'll upload that as well. Yeah, so that's it. I think you'll be done. So lecture number 9, the lecture number 1 I share in this course. So this will be the end of the course. So you have a number of questions mpaka at this point. Kuna vitu vingi sana ambavyo I just skip kwa sababu nilicopy this from the books which I've shared in the folder, also from the ST4 I think ambayo iko natumika zamani. Kwa all the resources ziko mle ndani. Kwa I just skip a number of things inavyo kwa sababu otherwise I will have to read the slide. So I'm not reading the slide much. So just take your time to read all this. Vitu ni vingi. Mtaona kwenye tutorial questions kuna some very interesting questions. So I'll stop here, and then of course you can read. You can use next week maybe for reading and stuff like that, and then of course we'll start the assessment in week like after next week. So after next week, expect the test. Also expect the quiz. Yeah, so I've received your assessment. Yeah, so most of you have seen your assessment. I was not able to reply to one by one, but I've seen your assessment. So now I'll have to assess the assignment and also get prepared for the quiz and test, which will be done in week number, like after next week, right? Yeah, so we'll have more time to prepare for the final exam, and I will have to stop here. So unless if you have any question. And in case if you want tutorials, I think because Sam is here, maybe you can talk with Sam, and then Sam can take you through the tutorial that is actually needed. But you'll have to communicate that to me. So any question up to that point? Okay, so and again, for attendance, I will use this week and next week as the benchmark. So you will see marks for attendance, and attendance means this week and last week. So I have the record of that. Kuna watu mlitumia majina ambao I don't understand, so I will be checking who is this person, who is that. I know, I mean, some of you, you're not even listening here. You have just joined. I know that. But I think it's better than just disappearing completely, because this is just a formal. So if we agree that we are going to have online class, it means that just a formal class, just like face-to-face class. So expect everyone to come. And those who have attended, is like, okay, so the assumption is like, my plan, if this could be, let's say, a face-to-face, my plan was to give a quiz. Last week was the quiz, quiz day. So because I was not able to run that online, because I was my worry was people will say, okay, I had internet problem or like that. So what I'll do that I'll just give you a face-to-face quiz. But those who attended the lecture last week are the ones who have qualified for the quiz, because it's just like attending the class and not attending the class. So that will be the reference point. So last week only 26, I think, students attended the lecture. So no. Okay, so I've seen your method, Sharon and Avon. I'm not sure if that is true. Sharon, yuko na nani kwa mfano? From one laptop? No.
Samir hapa nipo na Sharon chuo.
Samir mbona nilikuona ulijoin kwenye your own laptop?
Pale nilikuwa kwangu, sasa hivi nipo chuo. Kwa hiyo nimejoinia na Sharon hapa chuo. Hatupo wengine hapa wawili chuo sasa.
Mko watatu, you guys. How do you live like to 2026 mko watatu? How is that possible? Ben, how is that possible? Mko 3. Okay, I will find a more robust way to do that. Kwa sababu last week walitenda watu 26. I'm checking everything. So only 26. Okay, I will see what is the robust way to do this. Okay, so anyway, thank you for coming. And if you have any question or any comment, I mean, just okay. Okay, so I will check this anyway. Okay, so thank you. So this will be the end, and expect the assessment after next week. So the test, I will have to compose the test next week, and then after next week you can do the test, and then the quiz, and then the assignment. Okay. And I cannot trust you. I cannot trust the students. I never trust the students. Kwa kweli. Kwa hiyo, sorry?
On camera.
No, it's fine. I will find like another approach to catch you. So it's fine. Kenneth Msabila, huyu Msabila hata huwa onekani class inaonekana. So okay. Okay, fine. I will check how to run this. Okay, thank you for coming, and I'm going to end this right here now.